JFK. The 1991 film from Oliver Stone is one of the most controversial of all time. It deals with one of the most disputed American historical events in the country's history.
But we're not going to talk about any of that today because this is a film podcast, not a fact-checking podcast. I'm Peter.
And I'm Shay. And you're listening to
Stellar Alignment. Welcome to episode 8, where we're talking John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the film adaptation, based on the books On the Trail of the Assassins by Jim Garrison and Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy by Jim Marrs. Screenplay credited to Oliver Stone and Zachary Schuyler. The script had numerous other contributors and researchers.
Starring but not limited to Kevin Costner, Gary Oldman, Sissy Spacek, Joe Pesci, Tommy Lee Jones, and the list goes on and on. Which makes this the most used movie in 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
What'd you think of the movie?
I've seen it before. I did like it. There was a lot of exposition. And we could have went through and taken detailed notes and fact checked this, which I'm sure there are tons and tons of podcasts that have done that and broken it apart.
Critics, film reviewers.
I just didn't want to touch that part of it.
Historians. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are not historians. We're interested in the cinematic aspect of the movie.
It as a movie, as entertainment.
And was it entertaining?
Yes.
And I agree. I've seen JFK before.
This one isn't really my type of movie. I still found it entertaining. I found it well shot. Mm-hmm. And there were so many stars in it.
Lots of stars.
So many stars.
Very star-studded.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I heard, there's a decent amount of actors in this movie that waived their fee just to be a part of the film. This is 1991. It is kind of the height of Oliver Stone. Born on the 4th of July has come out. Platoon's come out. Wall Street has already come out. The Doors came out also in 1991.
Wow, busy.
And because of the subject matter, I'm sure there's a lot of actors that wanted to be a part of this retelling of a very infamous historical event in American history. There's a lot of controversy behind the film because there's many critics out there that believe that Oliver Stone took liberty. He's based it off of 2 specific books that we mentioned before, mm-hmm. as well as a lot of research that went in behind the film. But as far as entertainment goes, it's definitely an entertaining movie.
Very entertaining.
It's
well
kind
shot.
Of like one of those edges. See, the thing is you know what's going to happen, right? We know the outcome of this. The question is where are the storytellers going to take the story?
I think it's suspenseful and edge of your seat. And even though there's lots of monologues and exposition and interviews, it's still very entertaining.
The editing really done really well. He's able to deliver, like you said, all this exposition and monologues and everything done in a really good way because it's lawyers interviewing suspects or witnesses from the scene of the crime, and it doesn't feel forced. There mm-hmm. are actually a decent amount of scenes where Kevin Costner's just monologuing. I mean, there's a huge mm-hmm. monologue from Kevin Costner at the end of the movie. There's the scene with Mr. X, Donald Sutherland's character, where Donald Sutherland is exposition for 16 minutes straight. But it's because it's this secret meeting between Costner's character, Jim Garrison, and Mr. X, and he's divulging this information to him.
Mm-hmm. And while their scene is very placid, they're just walking, mm-hmm. monuments behind them.
Sitting on a park bench.
Exactly. There's just cut to these other scenes illustrating this point and this history and exactly this conspiracy going on behind them.
And I think you're touching on something good there. The editing that's done among the interviews and among these exposition marathons is done really well. And in fact, the movie was nominated for 8 Oscars, just like last week's Raging Bull, nominated for 8, won 2. So the 2 that it won was Best Cinematography and best film editing. And I would say that's well deserved, because the way that they're able to edit all of the footage that they make themselves, and also edited in real footage
Real one.
from the time, is done very smoothly. A lot of the camera shots that he chooses to use, done very well. It does feel like a thriller, which is odd, because again, we know the outcome, right? We don't know exactly, especially for the first time viewer, where Costner's character is going to end up at the end of the movie. And ultimately, none of that works out the way Jim Garrison wants. But the lead up to all of it is kind of edges your seat. One scene that I'm thinking of in particular that I took note of is the scene where Costner is interviewing John Candy's character, Dean Andrews, and there's just this close up right next to the side of Candy's face. It's a moment where he's speaking low and doesn't want the people in the restaurant around him to hear him, and it's a very tense scene, and just this close up on his face was just, it made you feel really tense, like you wanted to keep this a secret. Also, the flashbacks that are done in black and white, and this home footage and the pictures and the news articles, and the editing of the shots along with the sound, also nominated for best sound, didn't win though. Very interesting how they did all that.
Absolutely, super meta. Like another scene, Kevin Costner is just in his library or office, and he's reading the Warren Report. But as he's reading, he pictures the court scene, which is now a flashback. The actor Pruit Taylor Vince was in there, and he was recounting what he saw on the witness stand, and they were just getting his testimony on the witness stand. And when he started talking in the courtroom, in the Warren Reports that Kevin Costner's just reading, there's like a black and white footage, like backflash, where he's overlooking the parking lot, and he sees a couple people, and it's like really fuzzy and out of focus, and it's very clearly different shots, and it's a shot within a shot within a shot.
Right.
It's fantastic.
They use a lot of different cameras too. I forget exactly how many different cameras they use, but they're using 8 millimeters, 16 millimeters, and all these different types of cameras and different film to get this different feel. They're shooting it from different angles. Of course, I have to mention, because I am a Seinfeld fan, the courtroom scene where they're talking about the magic bullet and the connection to the Seinfeld episode with Kramer and the magic loogie, where they're talking about Kramer and Newman getting hit by a spittle from Keith Hernandez, them saying that they both got hit by the same spit, and Jerry walks them through, and it flashes back into black and white just like it does in JFK. What's really funny about that is in the courtroom scene, Wayne Knight is being used in the car, and he also plays Newman on Seinfeld, so a little bit of a connection there.
Funny.
That's fun. So many comedic actors. Of course, Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon, old school comedic actors that have been in tons of movies together. Only movie they did together that they weren't in a scene together. A little bit of trivia there too. We only listed a few names at the top, the ones that had the most screen time. We could go through the list. Said Kevin Costner, J.O. Sanders, who most people would probably know by name, but has been in many movies. I remember him first from the 90s Angels in the Outfield. Ed Asner, of course, Jack Lemmon, Vincent D'Onofrio, Oldman, we said, Sissy Spacek. Brian Doyle Murray plays Jack Ruby. Wayne Knight, Michael Rooker, who is an amazing character actor. Laurie Metcalf.
So many.
Gary Grubbs, who's another one just like J.O. Sanders, who you recognize because you've seen him. He's like, oh yeah, that guy, but you just don't ever know his name. Joe Pesci, Walter Matthau, we said. Pruitt Taylor Vince, who...
Identity.
Yeah. Among other films, Tony Plana, Tommy Lee Jones, Kevin Bacon, John Candy, Ellen McElduff, Frank Whaley, who's another one of those actors that you see a lot, but you may or may not know his name, was trying out for the role of Lee Harvey Oswald, eventually goes to Gary Oldman. He plays the imposter, Lee Harvey Oswald. Ron Rifkin, Donald Sutherland,
It just seemed like there was a new person popping up every
It
time.
was like every new scene was like, oh shit, that
That
person's
guy?
in this, or this person, I can't believe he's in this. And it was a winner of best editing and best cinematography. Was nominated for best picture, best director, did not win. Tommy Lee Jones was nominated for best supporting actor, best screenplay, best sound, and best original music. Who was John Williams was the composer of this film, of course. John Williams being, Back to the Future and Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Jaws and anything basically Steven Spielberg has done. He was nominated for a whole list of other awards that we won't go into, namely Golden Globes, nominated and won Best Director for Oliver Stone. No other wins there. And then nominated and won Best Editing and Sound for BAFTAs. Nothing else that we really felt was worth mentioning, although it is worth mentioning that after this film, Oliver Stone has not received much love from the awards society. I wouldn't say his career started to go downhill from here, but I think that this movie really set his career back, and people kind of knew where Oliver Stone stood politically from past movies before JFK, but after this one, people I think had a hard time looking at Oliver Stone as anything other than this man
Some agenda.
who really has an agenda. Yeah.
We're not going to get into the political side of this movie. Although, as a mystery, as a thriller, I love the way he just posed questions. There's this one scene where Kevin Costner's talking about, all these big three-letter companies on this one block, and how did they not know this one guy here, posing these questions for everyone who's
That's
in this reality.
Like,
that was a pretty good one.
In Louisiana, this is the CIA building, FBI. I can't remember all of them, but here is this building where
on the corner,
Ed Asner's character, I'm blanking on his name, had a private eye office, and also in the office ran this organization that was kind of pushing the communist agenda. And Lee Harvey Oswald apparently was part of the team that worked out of that office. Points out, is how did they not notice right on their front step or whatever.
Very interesting. Not their real life stuff. I don't want to know.
It's funny because I was 8 years old when this movie came out, so I didn't see this when it came out. I saw it in my teenage years. For someone our age, it's tough to not think about the theories in this movie when you think about the assassination of JFK, because the magic bullet theory became a very big part of the whole story. And I personally don't know if it became big because of Jim Garrison's actual investigation or just because of this movie. I think that we've mentioned in past podcasts that we have learned things from movies. I think a lot of people do. You learn a lot when you watch
you get exposure,
television and movies.
Culturally, the information.
The important thing to note here is, just like the internet, which has come after television and movies, is you've got to make sure that you're checking your facts and you're not basing everything you know off of one bit of information that you got from the internet or TV and movies or whatever it is. You never quite know if it's true or not.
You probably can't really get rid of a body.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I wouldn't try just because
you thought you could.
Dexter was able to do it. I wouldn't.
No.
Yeah. I mean, I probably could.
I probably could.
But
I've seen a lot of movies.
Yeah. This is not admissible, by the way. This is all for entertainment value.
We were here the whole time. I can see why my mom had a crush on Kevin Costner. Mm-hmm. He is a Southern gentleman.
He's not from the South, though.
You know what? I don't care. I love the accent.
He
played it well. He played it well in a suit.
I actually...
tall, thin.
I had a note about Kevin Costner's enjoyable to watch, but I don't know about his accent.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I loved it.
We need to
I don't know
mention our boy Joe Pesci.
Right, Joe Pesci.
We've no longer go through scene by scene, especially with a movie like JFK. It would be impossible
It
for
would be
us to
impossible.
dissect the movie that way. We do need to mention specifically Joe Pesci when he enters with his red wig and drawn on eyebrows. There's people out there who are just like, oh my god, this is horrible costume, and especially one scene where his wig like moves. It's meant to be a wig.
Yeah,
It's part of
obviously a
his
wig.
character. Apparently, David Ferry had alopecia and was bald and couldn't grow facial hair and probably didn't have eyebrows. So he drew them on and apparently even made his own wigs, which did not look great. He did a good enough Southern accent, Pesci, but I think it's just so hard for him to hide the New Jersey accent. Very impressive, I think, portrayal from Pesci. I think this is probably the biggest range we've seen.
Oh, you think so?
I think so. Joe Pesci's character, David Ferry, is a very pivotal character in Jim Garrison's case and in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
David Ferry had supposed connections to Lee Harvey Oswald via Clay Shaw or Clay Bertrand, played by Tommy Lee Jones. His character is kind of a flamboyant, extravagant, outlandish person who apparently did and said crazy things. I did see a bit of trivia that said he tried to make a submarine out of a septic tank.
Oh, so when he was trying to cure cancer with the mice in his apartment,
He just
was it just like a
type of guy that was
experiment he was actually
trying to figure stuff out and kind of did crazy stuff. His portrayal of this character is, I would say, probably the furthest departure as far as any other Joe Pesci's characters go. It's like you look at his award nominating roles or even winning roles, Goodfellas, Casino, The Irishman,
very gangster.
Raging Bull. They're all very similar characters.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this before. Like, we know that Pesci can do outraged. We know he can play the tough guy. I remember in our first podcast about With Honors, I had stated that this was the most dramatic role. And what I meant by dramatic was
Vulnerable.
the most vulnerable role that I'd ever seen Pesci play. This one, I think it's the most range we've seen out of Pesci, playing a gay man who from the South,
with
who's also
the skin hair condition.
an anti-communist who's working with Cuban. It's very interesting.
He's a different character for him.
Character, yeah. We do get to see our favorite, which is what we look for every time we see Pesci, is his Pesci-isms. They meet up with him after the first time they interview him, and he is afraid at this point, and he's very paranoid, and they take him to a hotel, and I think it's the next scene, he ends up killing himself. Of course, there's speculation
And
that
it's off screen
that
too.
he didn't kill himself, but his wig is half off and cocked. You know, he's looking out the window and he's
Paranoid
checking to
as
see if
fuck.
people have bugs on him, and he's moving all around like Joe Pesci tends to do. There is the part where he says it's a mystery inside of a riddle wrapped in an enigma, which is like a ridiculous kind of seems like pontification from Oliver Stone, but apparently that is not verbatim, but a quote from Winston Churchill.
Okay, I can see the range. I do see this departure of his normal characters.
He didn't have that much screen time. Of course, he did have a decent amount more than Once Upon a Time in America.
Yes.
But
I didn't realize how important he was.
He is in like 4 or 5 scenes. And then, of course, there are a lot of flashbacks and stuff like that to scenes with him. Some very ridiculous scenes of him partying with Tommy Lee Jones and Kevin
Painted
Bacon.
in gold and
I guess there's some sort of
angel
masquerade
cherub, something
orgy party where
Yep.
they're like doing, what are the popper things? I don't know what those are.
I have no idea.
They break them and
Old drugs.
yeah. This is after Goodfellas,
Oh.
but I think also before he wins the Oscar, and then before My Cousin Vinny. So in between those two, I'm trying to think back to when I first watched it, and I know that the first time I watched it, it like blew me away. Of course, I was young and naive. I'm like probably a teenager or early 20s in college, and I'm watching something like this and thinking like, holy shit, our government's lying to us. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I don't believe the story that he's giving us is fully factual.
Maybe not.
Now we're talking about the politics.
Oh, dang it. Okay, let's get away from this.
The thing about this movie is we enjoy the shots, we enjoy the acting. Kevin Costner's phenomenal. And apparently Oliver Stone, although went to both Mel Gibson and Harrison Ford first, settled with Kevin Costner and told Costner to bring the same energy that he brought to The Untouchables. Wanted the character to have that same, I'm going to get to the bottom of this attitude like his character did in The Untouchables. There's a lot of small players in this movie. Kevin Bacon's character, Willie O'Keefe, is awesome. I made a note. Kevin Bacon, crispy and phenomenal.
Crispy. What is crispy?
Yeah. I don't remember, but at the time, I felt like he was crispy and phenomenal. Sissy Spacek as his wife, amazing. Laurie Metcalf is great on his team. Michael Rooker is always fun to watch. Like, he's so much fun to watch, even when he's like the worst character ever, like from The Walking Dead. Just fun to watch. Like Donald Sutherland probably put in just one day of work and is just sat there and monologued for 16 minutes and just a great yeah. So really fun movie to watch. Interesting. It's cool to see a take on a piece of history, as long as people know that it's a work of fiction.
It's entertainment.
Unless, who knows what happens
it's real.
When the documents come out.
We'll find out.
The documents, it's all in the documents. Yeah. The documents are there.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous, right? Like,
if they're there.
If there's documents that exist that could say something that happened didn't actually happen the way that it happened, then why are they secret? On that?
I don't understand.
It's national security. Here we go again. Government's keeping us safe.
They're protecting us from ourselves.
Or they're protecting themselves from us. And here we go, getting political again.
Let's get away from this.
Let's wrap this up, and we'll rate this film. We'll keep this short, unlike the film. Let's
rate this bitch.
Yes. What does Rotten Tomatoes say?
Rotten Tomatoes, so the tomato meter is at 84% fresh. Okay. The audience score was at 88%.
And IMDb an 8.0, so 80%. So all very similar, right around the same range.
I think out of 12, I think I'm going to give it a 7.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you're hovering, let's see, hovering just above With Honors, but below Casino.
Yeah.
That's good. I think that what's going to happen is we're going to get to week 12 and we might do a little shuffle Rooski. I'm going to give this movie a 9 for me, which is, let's see, just above My Cousin Vinny and below Casino.
Hey.
Yeah. I guess we just enjoy Tough Guy Pesci a little bit more than Conspiracy Pesci. We still have 4 more episodes to go. Next week we have 8 Heads in a Duffel Bag. After that, Goodfellas, Then we're doing Home Alone 1 and 2, and we're finishing
1 and
off
2.
with The Super.
The Super, which
Yes.
is a comedy, not a horror.
No one has ever said every time
What am
I
I
bring up
thinking
The
of?
Super, you're like, I think it's a horror. No one's ever said it's a horror. It's not a horror. Why does The Super make you think it's a horror movie?
No.
The Super. It's just, super is usually a good word. Do you know what the super stands for?
Superintendent?
Yeah, he's the super of the.
Of
Without
the
giving
building?
anything away, yeah, he's a superintendent of an apartment building
Okay.
that kills its tenants.
A creepy one.
Thank you for joining us today, where we talked about Oliver Stone's JFK.
And skirted around delicate topics.
Let us know what you thought. If you want to talk political, go for it, but we probably won't respond because we're not interested in having any sort of online political arguments with people, because that's not fun.
Some people think it's fun, but no.
Not interested. But if you want to talk about the movie, absolutely, hit us up. Give us your opinion. Let us know what you thought. You can hit us up on YouTube. We are at Stellar Alignment Podcast. We're also on Instagram at Stellar Alignment Podcast. And you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, or TikTok under that same handle. However, YouTube and Instagram are probably the best places to find us.
Yes.
Thank you again, and we'll see you next Thursday for 8 Heads in a Duffel Bag. Adios.
Bye. Starring but not limited to Kevin Costner, Gary Oldman, Sissy Spacek. Shit. Starring but not limited to Kevin Costner.
Spacey Sissack.
Stupid.